Hey, welcome to BACKtalk, the premier podcast from Successful Black Parenting Magazine, featuring in depth conversations and expert insights on crucial topics for Black families. We are now ranked as one of the top 4 Black family podcasts on FeedSpot. So I wanted to mention that because, that's an honor. We haven't had that before. So I'm really excited about it. And I'm your host, Janice Robinson Celeste. And parents, it's almost back to school time. Have you noticed there's a shortage of great quality teachers, especially Black teachers? Well, this is a problem on several levels, especially for Black and Brown students. Now, that's the topic for today on Back Talk. So I want you to stay tuned.
This is BACKtalk by Successful Black Parenting Magazine, the most listened to podcast for parents by parents.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into Back Talk by Successful Black Parenting Magazine, your go-to podcast talk show for parents. Now, I need a little favor from you all. All my fabulous listeners out there, go ahead and spread the word about our show. We are live, which means you can post questions under this video and we'll answer your questions live on air, but you have to do it early, okay? Now tell your friends, shout it out to your followers because sharing is truly caring. I know it's corny, but I like it. And don't forget to use hashtag BACKtalk when you post. Now let's dive in today's show because I am joined by Dr. Donna Nicol, who is the Associate Dean Professor for Personnel and Curriculum. And Professor, sorry, let me start over again. I don't want to mess this up because this is important because you have a title that I want people to recognize. Associate Dean of Personnel and Curriculum and Professor of History in the College of Liberal Arts, right? And at California State University, Long Beach. So that's important. I used to live right there. So I know that college. So I'm very happy to have you on the show. So welcome to Back Talk, Dr. Nicol.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
All right. Well, I introduced you, but you have done so much more and you have your book in the corner. So please tell the audience about yourself.
Yes. Well, my name is Donna Nicol. As Janice mentioned, I'm currently the Associate Dean for Personnel and Curriculum. And that is a role where I am principally responsible for faculty recruitment, faculty retention, problem solving between department chairs and faculty. But I came out of a 20-year career as faculty myself. First, I was the first woman of color, or the first non-white woman, period, hired and tenured in women and gender studies at Cal State Fullerton. I was also the first woman to become full professor in Africana studies at Cal State Dominguez Hills. That was 2021, I believe. And I had a career before becoming faculty. I was a junior high school teacher in Los Angeles Unified School District, where I taught social studies and language arts for about 3 to 4 years. And in between all of that, I was the director of academic advising for both Mount St. Mary's College and Ohio State University. So I've done K-12, I've done higher ed, I've done administration, and I've done faculty.
All right. I mean, the first Black woman, you said that several times. I'm just going to say Black job. All right. So this is a pure example of a great Black job that I'm so glad to have you in that position. And I'm so happy that you have achieved that. Tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah. So my book is entitled Black Women on Board, Claudia Hampton, the California State University, and the Fight to Save Affirmative Action. And it really traces the historical arc of affirmative action in California from its beginning in 1965 to its end in 1996, with a focus on the 20-year tenure of the first Black woman trustee, a woman by the name of Dr. Claudia Hampton. She also became the first woman to ever chair the Board of Trustees, and it's speculated that she's the first Black woman in the nation to ever have done so in terms of having governance over a university board. It's a little hard to kind of verify that. But this was in 1974 when she was appointed by Ronald Reagan, of all people. And Reagan had a notorious anti-Black stance. But Hampton just knew how to um, work with people, build relationships, and she helped to implement affirmative action. She didn't help write the policy, but she was critical in the implementation. And so when during those 20 years that she was on the board, African American students, Latino students, all students of color had a 30% increase in their admission to the university. Also, there was a 27% increase of faculty of color during that time. But then California turned around shortly after she passed away and got rid of affirmative action in 1996 with Proposition 209. And the reason I wrote the book and why it's important at this time is that now that the Supreme Court has gotten rid of affirmative action, well, they got rid of race conscious admission in universities with the decision last year, is that people need to see that there has always been animus against affirmative action. And in order to understand how to preserve affirmative action, you have to know the mechanisms by which they try to fight against it, and how this Black woman, not single-handedly, she worked with other people, but how she really worked to preserve affirmative action. And now that states are going to have to grapple, other states are going to have to grapple with what California did. California will give you a clear example of how this decimated our Black and brown student population.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I was just about to say that this is such an important topic, especially today, now that we have our vice president running for president. And are you hearing now? And I think they're just starting to back down on this a little bit, but I don't think everybody in the Republican Party got the memo, calling a DEI appointment. And we know she's earned her way, and she's more qualified than most of the people that are speaking that. So, we won't get into politics too much on the show, stuff when it involves your children. I will say that. But so this book is really important because, like you said, they are trying to get rid of affirmative action in many other states. And I'm looking at Florida. So, and it did give us a chance to shine. And we earned it. We still have to work 10 times as hard, just get noticed to get appointed, even with affirmative action. So congratulations on your book. We'll go back to it at the end of the show so people can learn how to get it. That way they'll remember. But I want to talk to you a little bit about teaching, because here we are back to school in just a few weeks in some areas. Now, how long have you been a teacher before you got to administration?
So I was teacher for about 3, 4, 5, I think it was 5 years, about 5 years. And then I moved over to university administration, then back to faculty for 20 years. And then this is a recent move back to administration.
So what made you switch from teaching to working in administration?
Yeah, so I love teaching. I really love the craft of it. I enjoyed the interaction with the students. But frankly, I had gotten kind of burnt out. And I was department chair in my last 7 years of teaching. So I also had all of the hiring, all the firing, all the budgets, all of the administrative things. So I think all of those things combined kind of wore on me. But the other part is that there are a lot of systems in place, a lot of barriers in terms of process that make it hard for both students and faculty to persist in the university, particularly in predominantly white institutions. There's a lot of hidden policies or practices that are not very clear. And I wanted to be in a position where I would clear the path for folks to be able to support students getting the right advising information, on what classes to take, how to make sure they got the resources that they need in terms of tutoring, pardon me, or psychological help. There were too many instances where I would have students come back to me after my class and come back and say, I wasn't able to get an advising appointment. I wasn't able to talk to this other professor without that professor claiming that I'm talking in a threatening or violent way. And so I became really concerned that there weren't enough Black people in senior leadership. to make sure that there was training around cultural sensitivity toward our students, but also how to really how to problem, like work with our students on how to problem solve and help them with their help seeking behavior, because that was a big challenge. So I really, thought it was important for us to be represented in senior leadership. And I am the first Black person in senior leadership in this position since this college, the College of Liberal Arts, had been founded at Cal State Long Beach. So that tells you that we are underrepresented. If in 2024, a college that's been around since the 1980s, I am the first.
Exactly. And you are needed. You're needed there. As a former, even public school teacher, um, I've seen the need to advocate for our students that are being treated differently. The same students that are not of color can do the same things, and they'll get actually praised for it.
Yeah.
Oh, for instance, they have such a charisma and personality, but they're not in class. They're supposed to be in class. Yeah, but he's a cool kid. Another kid, Black kid, he's such a troublemaker. He's always out of the classroom, but he has a great personality and he has charisma, and he can be a great salesperson one day because of his personality. So
Yeah.
I'm going to write him up. So I've seen, that's an actual example. I'm giving you a real life example that actually I
Mm-hmm.
advocated for. So
Yeah.
yeah. So but actually to have you in administration to be that where the buck stops here is so important, because even a teacher like myself in any situation can come and try to advocate. But if once it gets to the higher ups, there's nothing we can do,
Yeah.
so there's not much we can do. We can express our opinion, and we can be then labeled as troublemaking educators.
Yeah.
So now you have mentioned, I read this somewhere, that students are not as ready as they used to be after COVID, right? So how
Yeah.
is this affecting the teachers and the students?
Yeah. So when I was teaching in the middle, in during COVID, and um, there was obviously there was Zoom fatigue. That was obviously a problem for all of us. Uh, I don't think people realize that teachers and professors were tired of it too. Um, but so you had the Zoom fatigue, but you have to balance academic rigor with the accommodation for the fact that this was just it flipped everybody's world upside down. And what was happening was that there was, how do you make up for those gaps in student learning and student even curiosity? I don't even know that I didn't feel like the students felt curious. They just wanted to get through the day. They just wanted to get through that Zoom class. And so when they came back from COVID, you know, I had students who didn't have enough practice with the basic learning skills, like listening skills, writing skills, and all that comes with that, reading skills, and analysis, and that sort of thing. So I found myself teaching learning skills when I'm supposed to be teaching at the college level content. So I had to forsake some content in order to make sure the students had the basic learning skills. And I can't fault the students for this. Oh, this is once in a, hopefully, fingers crossed, once in a lifetime global pandemic. But what needed to happen, I think, both parents and students and teachers, we needed to almost take a case study approach to this and assess what each student needs. Because I think what was hard for me as an instructor was to give everyone these listening skills activities, for example. And some students could listen and do well, and others couldn't. And even at the college level, where we don't do like IEPs and things like that, we did need to have some individualized education or instruction or supplemental education. And we just didn't do that. We just thought we could just bring everybody back and everything would be fine. And it just really wasn't.
Wow. Now you make a really good point because sitting in front of the computer all day, we don't even do that for our homeschool kids that are home. They really did not know how to transition into a child-oriented way of learning.
Yeah.
With COVID, and it was a challenge. Like I said, we were thrown into it, right? So there's no one to blame for that. It's just something that had we had a chance to study it ahead of time, I'm sure we would have done it much better. But what I noticed, and this is not related to COVID, but it's related to screen time, and not necessarily Zoom, because that's kind of boring. But there's a lot of reports coming out now saying that, the kids who have too much screen time will have problems concentrating and will be easily distracted in school. And I don't know if parents, if you know this, but here's the thing with screens. Everything is moving past your child's face within like seconds of each thing. One thing, 2 seconds later, another. Everything's changing in front of them really fast visually, right? They're audio stimulated, right? So in real life, when that doesn't happen, guess what happens? They're bored. How many times have you heard your children say, I'm bored, I'm bored? They're used to that stimuli, just right in front of their face is changing. So you're right. Between what happened with COVID and them having their phones and screen time all the time, especially the younger, the worse it is, because you're training them at a young age that's kind of the norm. So how do we get kids to concentrate in school? That's going to be a challenge. And the fact that you recognize that and you put activities in place to help children is to be commended, because most people just will think something's wrong with kids,
Yeah.
and that's not the case. So that's a study that needs to happen, and we need to retrain teachers that today is different. Like this digital world it's making our kids learn in a different way besides just having everything accessible to them. So no, I totally appreciate that. I want to talk a little bit about first generation students. I was a first generation student to go to college in my whole family. I inspired others, which I didn't know until recently, maybe a few years ago when they told me. But I was. My mother started college, but she never got to finish it. So I was the first one to graduate. There's some big challenges at school still for first generation students. Can you talk about that a little bit and what we can do to better help them?
Yeah. So I'm not a first generation student, but I worked with first generation students all the time. And one of the biggest problems is or challenges that first generation students face is not having the kind of cultural capital, if you will, to know how to navigate the institution. So how to ask for services and ask for help and ask for support. They're used to doing it on their own, if at all. And so it really becomes important for students, first generation students in particular, to find a mentor or someone, an advocate on campus, whether it's a teacher, an advisor, a counselor, someone who they can go to and say, how do I go apply for financial aid? How do I do this? How do I do that? And so what I would tell students when I taught in junior high and also in university is that your first resource should be your teacher or your instructor. And you should be able to avail yourself of their office hours. A lot of students did not go. In my 20-year career as a faculty member, I probably saw, in a semester, I might have seen a total of maybe 5 hours worth of students. And we're required by law to have at least 3 hours per week set aside for office hours. And I might have seen 5 hours worth of students. So the students just did not avail themselves. And this is across generations, by the way, but students didn't avail themselves of the resource that's their instructor, let alone the writing center or the math tutoring lab. There are some campuses. I was at Dominguez Hills, and we had a first generation um, symposium that would bring first generation parents with their students so that the parents could understand what are the unique challenges that their child is going to face. Because for a lot of our students, particularly at commuter campuses and particularly Black and Brown students, the parents that don't understand what the student is going through often heaps a lot of responsibility on these kids, like taking, babysitting brothers and sisters and not understanding how that cuts into their study time, for example. Um, and one of the other challenges related to all of this is what I call the one and done. And that is this kind of ethos or mentality that a lot of our students, unfortunately, a lot of our Black male students, but Black women too, is that if everything doesn't line up and go smoothly in college and university, they'll drop out because they're they haven't been given enough support to deal with the bureaucratic red tape of how to navigate the library and financial aid and parking and all of those things. And so they're looking for this ideal, smooth transition from high school where they were told what to do to now they have to become their own advocate. And so a big challenge for a lot of first generation students is not having the right balance of challenge and support that's necessary for them to do well. And no student, I don't care if you're a first generation or fourth generation student, you need support. You need to know where to go and how to navigate the system, because there is a system and it's not very clear to you. I mean, I just wrote a book about a system that I taught in and attended those universities and still was learning stuff about the system.
Yeah, that's difficult. I remember that well. I mean, it did help that I started at community college. I just knew
Mhm.
that's what I wanted to do. I had a great dean there that I know I wanted to learn under. And then I went to Temple University, and it transitioned nicely, but I still felt overwhelmed. you know,
Yeah.
um, I remember that it's like it was yesterday. So I'm glad you mentioned that. That is a big deal, and parents, we do have to support our children if they're the first ones going to college or universities. Now, we do have though, and I didn't get to partake in this. Not that I wouldn't if I continue graduate school, but Black sororities. We have great Black sororities. My daughter pledged Zeta, and so I learned a lot about Greek life through her, and
Mhm.
that made me feel like, oh my God, I missed out somehow. But
No.
they help. I do feel like I missed out on something because I see the camaraderie now. Even when they go to apply for jobs, it's just like everything that like, oh, you're a Zeta, and it's just little signs they have from everywhere, from on their car to their body to their desk. It's everywhere. Uh, so, and that's the same thing. AKAs, deltas. So Black sororities, they really do, and fraternities help the students, like, right? So can you
Yeah.
give some examples of what they're doing?
Yeah, so I'm a member of Sigma Gamma Rho,
All right.
Sorority Incorporated, and I'm a 18-year member so far. And I joined as a graduate member. I did not join in undergrad. There was no chapter on my campus at the time. And so I pledged when I was older. And a lot of it was so that I could do the community service in community with other people, and also to do the networking. And so, in terms of programs that we all have for students, we have very robust scholarship programs where we do fundraisers in order to provide scholarships to students to attend college and university. So that's a big part of what we do. So philanthropy is a huge part. We don't call it philanthropy, which I don't understand why we don't. Um, but it is. It's philanthropic support for the community. We also have a lot of youth affiliate um, organizations. So, for instance, in Sigma Gamma Rho, we have a group for girls from age 11 all the way to 18 called the Rowers. And so the rowers do different type of activities and games. They attend STEM academies together. So it kind of builds that community for them of friends, but they're also being mentored by older members of the sorority. We also have a group for our little girls from age 5 to 10 called, excuse me, called the Rosebuds. And so we have another vehicle for them to get mentoring and support and activities and friendship. So those are just two right there, the youth affiliates and the scholarship programs. But we have, the for many years, Sigma Gamma Rho had or continues to have a program called Operation Big Book Bag, where we get students ready for the school year with books and supplies, their book bags. We get them ready for a good school year. And so there is a long tradition in Black Greek life that is focused on service to the community. And so it doesn't matter if you're in a sorority or a fraternity of the Divine Nine. That is our charge. So we operate a bit differently than the other organizations because one, our membership is lifelong. So you can join as a undergrad or as a graduate. We also have in Sigma Gamma Rho, I'm not sure about the others, but we have an affiliate for women who have not completed their bachelor's degree. We call them the Philos. So they're the friends of Sigma Gamma Rho, and they do activities with us and separately. So at all stages of a woman's lifespan, from the time they're a little kid all the way to the time that you are a senior, you have an opportunity to be in community, to give back to the community. And I think there's always been these charges of elitism that have been kind of thrown at fraternities and sororities, that they're exclusionary, and there have been those moments. I'm not going to pretend like those don't exist, but I think that without the Black Greek life system, uh, a lot of people wouldn't have been able to finish their degree without that level of support that they got on campus, especially if you're on a predominantly white campus and there's only a handful of you. Being able to have a group, walk across campus. I'm thinking about the founders of my own sorority that was founded in Indiana at the height of the Klan. And so you think about the camaraderie of having other Black women. So you're not just kind of walking across campus by yourself. But that translates even today on a lot of campuses, particularly, uh, say, in California, for example. We don't have a lot of Black students anymore. Well, our numbers have dwindled pretty rapidly after affirmative action was gone. And so we need these organizations to be there as a support for our young people.
Wow. That's amazing to me. I know you mentioned it earlier, but still resonating. Like after they got rid of affirmative action, our student numbers of Black students went down. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I heard you say earlier, but now it's just really resonating with me because, like you said, it's now starting to pick up like a ripple effect because of the Supreme Court, and we don't have it anymore. And so, what does the future look like?
Yeah.
Where are we going?
Yeah. And I want to say this. So although the Supreme Court just ruled on race conscious admission, some universities are trying to go a step further and get rid of race conscious scholarships. So if a donor had previously set up a scholarship for Black students, there are numbers of groups that are trying to overinterpret the Supreme Court decision to use that to get rid of race defined scholarships. And so if this happens, if the Supreme Court, and given this court, lets that happen, what's going to backfill that? And that backfill would be the fraternities and sororities providing their own scholarships.
Okay.
So most of us have a national scholarship, a scholarship fund, but we also have local chapter scholarship funds. And so having these kind of private Black Greek letter organizations is going to, given the shift in the Supreme Court, they're going to become even more vital now. Or, Florida with all the book bans and things like that. The Omegas just went down there for their conclave, which is their conference. And part of their service project during conclave was to give away books on Black history and Black culture to Black kids down in Florida.
Well, that's good.
So to like fill in that gap, and Black Greek letter organizations have always kind of filled that void when the policies were working against us.
Well, thank God for the fraternities and sororities stepping up to the plate as they always have. But now it's imperative more than ever, so that our students feel comfortable and they do get a shot at going to school and staying in school. Let me ask you, so here we are back to school. What advice do you have for parents and students to get ready for school this year, knowing all of the things we talked about?
Yeah, I think for parents, I think the most important thing is to pay attention to one, how much screen time. I think, like what can you do in terms of activities to engage your kids in a different way. I think that's important. I also think that it's important for parents to be honest about what their kids need. So let me give you an example. I had, even at the university level, I would sometimes have parents come in and say, I believe in my son, I believe in my daughter, but they aren't the most organized. And so what advice would you give them to stay on top of their assignments? And so I said, well, I would tell them to put everything in their phone as a reminder and, carve out some time at the beginning of the semester for like build in their study time now. Don't wait until the semester started. And so, when a parent can come to me and ask me for advice, I can't give them, because these people are grown now, technically by the law, I can't tell them, their grades, but I can give general advice. And so paying attention to what your child struggles with is important. And then also, I think in getting ready for school is I'm so worried about these book bans and anti-woke legislation, because it catches a fire, not just in Florida, not just in southern states. It starts to go all over. And I think it's important for Black parents in particular to center teaching Black history and culture, because there are going to be times when young people will go into these classrooms and they might be the only one, and they need to be reaffirmed about who they are and their place in the world. And I know that sounds like, oh, well, the semester is about to start. That's too unrealistic. Well, you can take them to the Black museums, take them to the Smithsonian, take them to the DuSable in Chicago, get them immersed into Black history and culture. I really firmly believe that when you have a strong sense of self, people cannot come back at you and tell you that you don't have a right to be there. And if someone calls you a DEI hire or a DEI admit, I'm at this point where it's like, I am, so what? The reason why we had to have DEI is because you've been racist all these years.
Boom. Really, it's serious. And you were saying that. Well, first of all, I just want to go back to the put everything in your phones thing, because that's great advice. You would be surprised how many students don't utilize the calendar in their phones, the reminders in their phones. As a former high school student, that was my advice to them too. Why didn't you put in your phone? You put everything else in your phone. Why wouldn't you put that in your phone?
Yeah.
Right. So parents, teach them how to use their calendar, the reminders and alerts on the calendar. Teach them how to use the actual reminders on their phones. Because that's an essential tool. We used to have those little journal things. We would write our assignments and go into school. They don't do that anymore. It's all put in their phone. So that's great advice. I also wanted to touch on the fact that you said, center the students in Black history. Love that idea. I know as a former teacher in Florida, I would be terrified to do that now. So
Hmm.
now, what advice do you give the teachers on if they're scared about losing their job or being called to the principal? People kind of know my political views here, so I'm not going to get into too much, but I got in trouble. I shouldn't have said this in the classroom, high school, okay? And I taught all grades because I taught television production. But when Trump was running for office and he won, I said, he's not my president. I got in so the girl went right on the phone, text her dad. I got in so much trouble, and it was a Trump town too that I taught in. They were all Trump voters, and I got in so much trouble. But I just said that one little thing, and I know it was inappropriate. I
Yeah.
know it was, but I taught my students because we did television production to produce things that were on their minds, right? And so
Hmm.
we were a little more free spirited than most classes like English or whatever. So, how do teachers do this when they're terrified?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. And honestly think that folks down in Florida and other states where you have all of these bans and things like that, they're going to have to partner with parents and community organizations in order to kind of get that subversive type of teaching done. There is a tradition. African Americans created the freedom schools during the Freedom Summer in the 1960s. And that was basically where they were in church basements teaching Black kids how to not only read and write, because they had such subpar education compared to the white kids because of segregation, but they also taught them about their history and their culture. And so they use Saturday schools as a vehicle to supplement the education. And you can actually, now they have made the curriculum digital. So you can go online and see the Freedom Summer curriculum. So I would say utilizing that curriculum in concert with a Black church. Uh, Maybe the teachers might say, hey, on Saturday, I'll come in and do a mini lesson for your kids, or here's some suggested readings. I think that we're going to have to get creative to make sure while we're making while we're responding to these political changes, the kids are going to lose out if we do nothing. And so work with the fraternities and sororities and say, hey, is it possible for you guys to have a Saturday school for us, or some kind of mini lessons on African American history? So I think that there are ways in which to protect the teacher, while at the same time getting that information to the students. And the other thing is that being involved in the PTA for those schools becomes important for the parents, because if the parents are holding purse strings for, say, the football program, and you say, well, if you don't have any books about Black history in your library, then I'm going to withhold the funding to get your football uniforms. People respond to that much differently, um, like parent power. So I think parents are more powerful than we realize, because they're unfortunately, we look at education as transactional. And so because we look at it as a transaction, every transaction that the parent does can have a much broader impact than people realize. But a lot of times parents don't know or don't have time because they're working multiple jobs and things like that. So it's difficult. But if you can get a group of parents, a group of Black mothers come into a school together, not one-on-one, because they can pick one and one off.
Mhm.
But if you can get a group, yeah, you can push back.
I love that idea. I also love the idea of Black History Saturday schools. I think we need to make that a movement at this
Yeah.
point. Just yesterday in Georgia, they stopped the AP Black History lessons just yesterday. So
Yeah.
it is happening. They're snatching things away from us, guys. And we sit here idle until it really hits home, and then we start yelling. It seems like that's what I'm seeing as a trend. Instead of as soon as they step, we start. I'm also an early childhood specialist. So one of my favorite books is If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. I don't know if you know that one, but it goes basically, if you give a mouse a cookie, he'll want a glass of milk. You give him a glass of milk, he's going to want a napkin. And it goes on and on with every time you give him something, he wants something else. Well, this
Yeah.
is kind of how it works, right? In politics, we let something go, they go to something bigger. We let
Mhm.
that go, they go to something bigger until we are stepped on and we're hollering, right? Because we
Yeah.
now feel it. Because sometimes it's a trickle down thing where you don't feel it right away, but eventually you're going to feel it. And so when people say politics don't have anything to do with them, it has everything to do with you and your family. It has everything to do with you and your family. Because if you don't do politics, politics will do you, is what I say to people.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
will. So
Absolutely.
I'm very involved and I'm always paying attention. So I know what's going on in the world. Sometimes it's actually scary to know so much. Ignorance is bliss, right? Knowledge, it's not too much knowledge is scary. Let me ask you about your hopes. What do you hope changes in schools to make sure that everyone gets a fair chance?
Oh man. Where do we begin? What do I hope for? I'm really concerned that we have oversold the idea that charter schools were going to save us. Um, well, the history of charter schools, they started as segregation academies after the Brown versus Board of Education decisions, where white parents didn't want their kids to go to integrated schools. So they petitioned to get their money moved to an academy, a segregation academy. So that's the origin of charter schools. And then by the 80s and 90s, we were full-fledged into this kind of charter schools are going to save public education. And unfortunately, the same types of problems that you would see in the regular public school, you see mimicked in charter schools. And the way in which it was sold to Black parents in particular was that we're going to manage the discipline better, so then that will help with student learning. Well, the problem isn't just student discipline, it's also teacher training, it's also facilities, it's also what is happening when the kids go home in terms of, parent engagement, doing homework and reinforcing those sort of things. So, one of my hopes, particularly for Black kids, is that um, the adults, start to demand better, the not just from the charter schools themselves, but also, um, I think we need to demand more from ourselves in terms of understanding how these things work. So let me give you an example. I was asked to serve on a charter school board in Ohio when I was living there. And I said, well, let me see what your academic program looks like. Let me visit, let me do a tour. And this, I go and I'm just like, it's like, this doesn't feel quite right. Like, you don't have adequate enough facilities for the number of students you keep telling me you want to have. Why do you want to keep doing these expansions? And it's like, well, it becomes this kind of this bad idea of, I'm going to keep getting more students because I need the money in order to pay for the students that I'm already working with.
Mm.
And so it's like, but what these kids do need is actually smaller classrooms. So you're chasing the dollar in order to provide adequate support to students, but in order to make more money, you have to get more students. So it just never sat well with me. So I refused to serve on the board because I just couldn't make heads or tails of this idea of bringing in more, stacking them high, and like in order to provide resources. So I do think that when a parent is checking out a school, being mindful of the student ratio, the student to teacher ratio, those are things that are important. I think we need to be, I think we, again, parents and the rest of us give too much power um, to officials about our kids. And what I mean by that is not speaking up and saying that my child needs this, or my child needs that, and not being afraid to ask for it, you know. But I also think my other hope, honestly, I would love to see us not only have the Saturday schools, but I actually would like to see the Black boarding school movement reemerge,
Mhm.
because I think Black kids need to be able to learn and to play in safe spaces.
Mhm.
There was a long tradition of Black boarding schools all dotted all across the US. And those kids were able to thrive in those environments. They also had things. There were summer camps for Black kids. One of the members of my sorority established a thing called Camp Achievement in Pittsburgh, and so every summer the Black kids would go to Camp Achievement for 2 or 3 months, and they would get, like, academic studying, but it was mostly for them to learn how to play freely, without the threat of police violence or inner city violence. So I think we need to look for as many opportunities as possible for our kids to experience joy, but also to get the academic rigor. And how do we build up their self-confidence? And finally, for the college students, I really hope that the students learn some better help seeking behavior, because waiting until the last minute to come in and say, "Hey, Dr. Nicol, they're about to kick me out of university." It's like, why didn't you come to talk to me sooner? Or I don't have enough financial aid. Like, okay, why didn't you come talk to someone? Or I'm going to give up because things are not working out. It's like there are programs to help you. We have programs for students who don't have that have food insecurity or housing insecurity, um, but the students don't utilize them. And I have to say constantly, your fees pay for the student writing center, the tutoring center. It goes to support the food insecure, the food pantry. So don't feel any shame about going to the food pantry. You're paying for it. And they're like, oh, I didn't know I was paying for it. I thought somebody was just giving something to me for free. I said, none of this stuff is free.
Good point. I wouldn't even thought of that. That's great. I love it.
Yeah. So I think we got to let go of the idea of shame, you know, in asking for help or trying to be cool. I don't want to look like I need anything. And it's like everybody, the Steve Jobs, when he created, Apple, needed help. Everybody needs help. There's nothing wrong with asking for it. What's wrong is sitting there. There's an opportunity or there's a resource that's free to you and you don't use it.
Mm-hmm.
And then come back and say, man, they made it hard for me, made it hard for a brother or sister. It's like, no, you you didn't use it. Like I would tell students about they wanted to go to grad school. I said, Princeton Review offers fee waivers for their GRE prep course. All you got to do is some simple paperwork. And they're like, well, how did you know that? I said, I went on the website and look, that's what you do. After I saw the cost and almost fell out of my chair, how much it costs, they have in very fine print fee waivers available. Go click on that link.
That's great advice. Okay, so parents, you've learned today, and this is all ages. Let them use their phone to keep track of their assignments, right? Look for the scholarships from the HBCUs and the sororities, mainly the sororities and fraternities. And also utilize free services at the college because you are paying for them or their child's paying for them. Whoever's paying for them, it's in their fees that they are paying for all the free services. So you got some good advice today. Now we're out of time, but I want you to tell people where to find your book, Black Women on Board.
Yes, so you can go directly to my website, which is Donna J Nicol, NICOL.com. And you can go directly onto the website. And there's links where you can purchase the books and you can actually hear this Black woman in her own voice. I have audio clips from the 1970s of her talking about what it was like to be the first Black woman on board.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Nicol, for joining us today. It's a pleasure having you and talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me as well.
All right. And a big shout out to all of you tuning in and engaging with us here at BACKtalk by Successful Black Parenting Magazine, the syndicated podcast that's a must for Black parents everywhere. And make sure you follow us on social media. The more you engage, the more we all can thrive. So we will be back next week with more. Until then, I wish you all the best and much success. Take care. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to BACKtalk by Successful Black Parenting Magazine. We'll see you soon.